Well, in Hong Kong, pro-democracy rallies are waning less than 2 weeks after they began, and just a day before high-level talks between student leaders and the government take place. Andrew Stevens is with us from Hong Kong. Andrew, we will get to that in a moment, but we are hearing about trouble brewing for Hong Kong's chief executive, CY Leung, over revelations that he received large payments from an Australian company. What are the details, and what are we to make of the timing of this new information, given that protesters had been calling for his resignation?
Well, certainly the timing is an embarrassment to CY Leung, the leader here. And you're right, Rosemary, that the protesters have from day one demanded his resignation. What has happened in the last 24 hours is that it's come to light that the chief executive received a payment of just slightly less than $6.5 million when he was chairman of a company. That company was sold, and he took that money, or was offered that money, as a non-compete clause. So basically the company that bought his company paid him off so he wouldn't start as a rival. Now, this happened before he became the chief executive, but the payments were made, staggered payments were made after he was indeed elected by this nominating committee in 2012 as the chief executive. So he hasn't done anything wrong, legally at least. He wasn't legally obliged to reveal the payment, how much he actually made from this. And they have said, his office has been saying that indeed that it was all above board in accordance with the Hong Kong law. Obviously, it is a little, the timing is interesting because it is a highly politicised situation here in Hong Kong. So opposition to CY Leung are using whatever they can to throw at him, to try to bring him down, to embarrass him. There are suggestions perhaps that Beijing might be behind this. There's certainly no evidence of that being the case. In fact, one of the main opposition leaders here, someone who has been a strong Democrat for many, many years, Emily Lau, sort of laughing off that suggestion that Beijing may somehow be involved in this. So it's embarrassing, but it's certainly not illegal. The optics aren't good, Rosemary, but the government is saying that CY Leung has done nothing wrong.
All right, but timing is everything, isn't it? Let's go back to those demonstrations then. Of course, we mentioned just one day away from these critical talks between demonstrators and Hong Kong government officials. What's being said about the likely compromises that might be made to try to stop these protests going forward?
Well, nothing at the moment. What we are going to see tomorrow is talks not about the key aspects that the protesters are demanding, the resignation of CY Leung and the change in the process to nominate the next leader of Hong Kong. What they're going to be talking about tomorrow is a little bit more arcane. It's about getting the constitutional and legal framework to actually then go ahead with talks about substantive changes. I mean, this has to happen because this has been a process which has been in place for 30 years since the first joint declaration of Hong Kong going back to China was made between China and the UK. So they just can't throw sort of 30 years of understandings and of a framework out the window before they get onto these substantive talks. So nothing has changed so far. Those talks will go on tomorrow afternoon. The students have expressed their disappointment that they won't be tackling those substantive issues straight away, but they certainly are still agreeing to go ahead with the talk. So I wouldn't expect a lot to come out of tomorrow's, but there will be further talks. And while those talks are on, Rosemary, the protesters say they plan to stay firmly in their occupied positions, causing this disruption to Hong Kong. That seems to be open-ended at the moment, despite the fact that more and more Hong Kongers are getting, frankly, fed up with the disruption that's being caused to their lives.
Yeah, and of course that's what we're seeing. Fewer protesters on the street, but just enough to annoy a number of people there, a large number indeed.